The human spirit can't be boxed in. It's too funny, too deep, too naughty, too nice, too everything worth living. Trip on This is an invitation to live your most courageous life. It explores all the joy, pleasure, depth, and fullness of what it means to be alive. Through engaging conversations around psychedelics, futurism, sexuality, and wellness, together we open the door to limitless possibilities. My name is Kat Walsh, and I am honored to be your guide. Let the journey begin. The content shared on Trip on This, including all discussions by Kat Walsh and guests, is for educational and entertainment purposes only. We do not endorse or encourage the use of controlled or prohibited substances. Always consult with a qualified professional before making any decisions related to your health, mental well-being, or legal matters. Viewer discretion is advised. Let's get into it. Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of Trip on This. It's your host, Kat, and today's guest is Stephanie Wang. Stephanie is the founder and CEO of Empathogenics, a wellness company pioneering the use of Kanna, an ancient South African plant known for its mood-enhancing and empathogenic properties. With a background in finance and a passion for plant medicines, Stephanie has dedicated her career to creating innovative products that promote mental well-being and holistic health. Stephanie, welcome to Trip on This.
Kat, thank you so much. And I'm so excited to be on the show.
Likewise. Kanna is something that I'm very excited for people to learn about, to hear about, because on Trip on This, we are typically talking about things that, like, let's be honest, we can't have it. Can't have it, and or we can't have it legally. But Kanna is one of these very powerful plants that somehow has skirted by and is something that we can legally and safely have at home. But before we get into why Kanna for you and why Kanna is something for people to consider for their own life, I'd like to actually take us back on your journey, because like we were just talking about, most of us don't start here. We don't start in the plant medicine world or the holistic world. We're usually led there because of a need. Can you talk a little bit about your own background from your words and how you got here?
Absolutely. So I grew up in Hong Kong, and, I had quite a bit of trauma in my childhood. And so I always had this sort of yearning of there's got to be more than this. And I always had this feeling of, I know this is not life. Life is, I know, has to be more nourishing. This cannot possibly be it. Mm-hmm. And because I had that sort of childhood, it really motivated me to find out, what is it about the human condition? What is it that, that has what I felt could be a much greater potential be completely suppressed? And how do we get past that? How do we overcome? How do we understand and then embody something that is much more sort of alive and filled light and love and just delight and joy in life, right? I'm not saying, of course, you have to be happy 100% of the time. It's absolutely the opposite. It's actually being able to really embody what it means to be alive, meaning the full spectrum of emotions, right. Whether it's anger or sadness or joy or happiness. But that's what it is, right? And so I struggled for a long time because I couldn't, I felt so stuck and suppressed. And it really just led to a lifetime of being a seeker, for want of a better word. And that led me into sort of more spiritual practices. It led me to energetic healing, alternative medicine, you name it. And ultimately to plant medicines. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When did so I know we just were talking that you had a background in finance, right? How do you feel? First, what was the energy and attitude that you felt that you embodied at that time? And because going into plant medicine, right, the softening of what that is, the understanding of the energetics, it sounds like you actually already had a leg up. If you were already a seeker at a young age, how were you able to embody some of these other more balanced qualities in a world like finance?
Well, you know what? It took a long time.
Right.
And when finance, I still had not sort of embarked on even though I always was interested, I didn't really truly embark on the full awakened journey that I've been on since then. And it really took finance, having worked in investment banking and such, and I just never slept. It took a big toll on my health. I was making a lot of money, but I was really depressed.
Yeah.
And I just didn't understand why, right? And it took sort of that hitting that point of just going, I don't even know why I want to be alive anymore, right?
Yeah.
And really going into that dark place, could I then really, really authentically embark on the journey of kind of coming back up from that point?
Right.
And so finance in a way then was a pivotal moment for me, because it pushed me to the point of, embodying so much yang, so much like I would call it too much masculine energy, and just having everything, being valued on how much money you make, how quickly can you deliver. And there was no self-care. There was no, none of that. And it was actually at that point that my body actually really started to kind of break down. And so it was a beautiful pivotal moment for me, where I really recognized that I had to make a change, because if not, this was just not going to end well.
Yeah.
And that, I think, was because you can have an interest or a desire to do something, but oftentimes we need something, to hit us over the head in life, and then kind of go, all right, this is the moment.
Yeah.
Right.
I find that a lot of people have that, right? With like an awakening journey, or however, whatever word you want to call it, usually happens through like, whether it's grief or, some tragedy or something like you're saying, where the physical body starts slowly talking to us, and then it starts screaming at us. And most of us don't have a lot of body awareness. Actually, I didn't have any. I was like pretty disconnected, actually, from like, I was exhausted, but I was like, this is obviously how we all feel, right? Is this normal?
Oh, totally.
So.
Yeah, I feel you, I think, we're talking about my childhood just now. It was really hard, because I thought that was the norm. Same thing, right? I thought that being sad most of the time, feeling really low energy, just not being able to participate, in life. I was like, oh, I guess this is most days for most people. And of course, that's not true at all.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And I think the hardest thing was actually understanding and having faith that was not the norm, and wanting to find out what was on the other side of that.
Right. Well, and I think you bring up like a beautiful, unfortunately, I think it is actually a lot of the norm, at least here, right, in the United States, with like 50% now that can identify either having depression or anxiety or one of these things. So many people are wondering. I think they kind of look at people that are like bouncing and have all this energy and are glowing, like, what is that, and how, and where is that coming from? And I know for myself, it had to be fueled from the inside out. That's an inner well of energy that is different than what my coffee can produce. It is a different force that brings excitement to the forefront, but it takes time and uncovering, and that's the spiritual path, really. And I want to bring you back. You were mentioning your plant medicine journey and this healing journey. Can you walk us through a little bit of like what that looked like when your body started to break down? Then what? How'd you take care of yourself?
So that's when I really started to look into alternative healing, because a lot of symptoms and issues were chronic issues that really could not be addressed properly by allopathic medicine, right? So I went to a regular doctor. They're like, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with you," and I'm like, "No, this is not normal." And so that was a point where I, discovered Ayurveda. I was already into Chinese medicine, given my culture, traditional Chinese medicine. And, but then I looked more into like, what about Reiki? What about, all these other modalities that are out there? And so I really kind of a lot of trial and error just to see what worked for me. And sometimes certain modalities work for a moment, and then it was more for just that period. And then later on we'll move on. But I think what, to your point, body awareness, that is something that, going through these health issues really made me much more aware of, luckily, right? And what was interesting is, I've always, like I said, I've always been a seeker. I've always been interested in spirituality. And because of what I went through, you could say, growing up, and then through some of these more difficult periods of my life, I really had to lean quite heavily on my spiritual practices, which I cultivated and simultaneously learned more of because of the alternative health practices that I got into. Plus, you have, I was doing yoga, I was meditating, all of that really was, was coming from, it was a mixed, it was a combination of different kinds of modalities, but, again, experimentation to see what would support me the best way. And I think ultimately, plant medicine was interesting because I had and have been on that path for a long time. And then in 2013 happened to be the time which was when I first had my very first plant ceremony experience.
What was it?
And it was, funnily enough, it was not with ayahuasca or psilocybin or anything psychedelic. It was actually with Kanna.
Oh, okay. Right. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it leads into the whole Kanna story. And I did not know what I was getting myself into at all. I just, my friend went and my friend was like, oh, you should try this out. And I was like, okay. And and this is a ceremonial dose of Kanna. And my goodness, I had the most incredible experience. I had never experienced and felt that much acceptance, belonging, and just love. And it was very pure. It was not, I was not, just to be very clear, Kanna is psychoactive, but not psychedelic, meaning that it keeps you present. There's no hallucinations. You don't lose track of space and time, really. It's completely different from an experience, for example, with ayahuasca or psilocybin.
Right.
So, but just imagine being even more present than you would have been without the Kanna,
right,
and feeling all this connection between yourself, the rest of the world, the people in the room, and everything around you, and understanding that what cohered the whole world was actually love. And it was just a knowing. No one was, it was just like, boom, you could feel it. And it just was, it was incredible. And in that moment, I could not have any, negative thoughts. All my stresses completely melted away. And I was like, my goodness, I really want to bring this and bring this to more people and make it accessible to more people outside of ceremony. Because not only because of its sort of anxiety relieving qualities, beautiful heart opening qualities, but because, and sort of, mood elevating qualities, but because what I saw and continue to see in the world, that is one of, I think, our biggest wounds is that of separation and our inability to really connect our minds with our hearts and have what the Buddhists call, the heart mind. And if we don't have that, we're imbalanced, and we're imbalanced, we make bad decisions that ultimately lead to negative consequences. And you can see that sort of played out in the world. And, we really have lost connection. We have it all the time, but we have forgotten this, incredibly powerful connection to our heart. And therefore, the ability to bring in more empathy into everything that we do, to be able to bring in more intuition, more heart intelligence, is something that we've been lacking as a species. So to me, I was like, it really addresses the core of separation. Because this is what the feeling of Kanna and this beautiful sacred plant medicine does. And so I was like, this is great because I could get, I want to do this, not maybe something else, because it really gets to that core wound for all of us. And, what's beautiful about Kanna is, if I may talk a little bit about what the plant does.
Yes, that's one of my questions.
Yeah. And Kanna is a legal psychoactive. I already explained it's not a psychedelic. It doesn't cause hallucinations. It's legal in all states except for Louisiana, but it is legal also in the rest of the world. So it's very available. It's just not known because I'm not sure why, because it's always been there. It's been used for thousands of years by the indigenous Bushmen and the Khoi of Southern Africa. And it's a beautiful succulent plant that loves dry weather. And what it does, it's actually a natural serotonin reuptake inhibitor and a serotonin releasing agent. And so it really helps to lift mood. It has 35 different alkaloids, known alkaloids, 3 of which have been more deeply studied, but there are many of which that still need to be studied and researched. And Kanna also is an anxiolytic, and it helps to lower anxiety and stress. It also is a cognitive enhancer, so it helps improve cognitive function, executive ability, memory, and focus. And most beautifully, of course, it's an empathogen. It helps to open the heart and open you to more emotional range, as well as for you to have more empathy for yourself and others. So it's a great social lubricant. It's great for intimacy as well. And then finally, two other things that maybe are less known is that it's an ergogenic, which means it's a physical performance enhancer. So the indigenous Bushmen and Khoi would take it to go, especially the Bushmen, would take it to go on multi-day hunts.
Really?
Because of its ability to help maintain really grounded energy. It's not a stimulant like caffeine. There's no caffeine in this at all. So it's not sort of hyper. It's very grounded energy, and that has to do with an enzyme that Kanna inhibits called PDE4, and this PDE4 inhibition allows for the body to access more energy and resource more energy. And besides that, it also helps to lower inflammation, which helps for pain relief. So again, it helps, enhance stamina and endurance, right? So, I mean, I could go on and on, but there's that aspect. And because Kanna also stimulates the receptors for cholecystokinin, for GABA, for opioids, and for melatonin, melatonin, everybody knows, helps with sleep quality. Yeah. So longer term intake of Kanna can also help with improving sleep quality. Cholecystokinin, activation of receptors for that is interesting because what that leads to is curbing of excessive cravings. So it's really interesting.
Good for dieting even, or people that are wanting to lose weight or something of that nature.
Well, it could be, right? That's something that's an interesting aspect, but it's not. So for example, it will help curb hedonic cravings, meaning eating for pleasure, but it will not inhibit homeostatic hunger, which is eating to maintain your bodily functions.
Right. But usually when it comes to like cravings like that, it's not something that the body needs. It's like all the, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Or like all the sugar, all the things that like need sugar in the body, like all that kind of stuff. A lot of those cravings aren't like, I'm like, are you hungry or do you just want a snack? Cause like, it's an emotional,
emotional eating, hunger. That's exactly what you described.
Yeah.
So yes, there's potential for that. Although, I don't, I'm not advocating one way or another, but it's really interesting with this quality. And then, what's really fascinating also about Kanna is it's adaptogenic. So because of its 35 different alkaloids, you don't, after you take Kanna and let's say it wears off, there's no crash.
Right.
And Kanna has the ability with its many alkaloids to help regulate your nervous system over time and really take you out of flight or fight and really helps regulate the amygdala. And that's also a huge sort of adaptogenic aspect of what this plant does. Yeah. So ultimately, it makes you more resilient to stress, which is incredible, right? So all of that to say that this is just an incredible plant. And I think, we were talking earlier about caffeine, right? And, in our modern day life, you see people always up and, you wonder how many of them are taking maybe ADHD medication, or, how many of them are on a ton of caffeine, right? And ultimately, is that so good for our health? Maybe not so much, right? And then you look at an option like Kanna, which is great for focus, as I mentioned, as an alternative, possibly for ADHD meds, right? And, also for chemical SSRIs. Because it's a natural mood enhancer, right? Sure. And so the way it works is actually quite similar to how a chemical prescription SSRI works, except that it has, it does not have all the negative side effects. It is adaptogenic, meaning it's not toxic. It is not addictive. And it's also, there's no tolerance buildup for Kanna as well, as long as you keep it under a number of milligrams a day.
Right.
And it's fascinating that way because here finally is an option that's non-pharmaceutical that practitioners and healthcare workers and therapists could also look at, right? Yeah. To share with their clients and their patients. And it's fascinating because we've also, at Ka, we've been working with therapists and, naturopaths and functional medicine doctors, and, who are actually using our product to help, for example, their patients slowly wean off of SSRIs.
Can they be used together, or do they need to be fully weaned off before they start using Kanna?
That's a really good question. So there is a contraindication between SSRIs, MAOIs, SNRIs, and DRIs, and benzodiazepines with Kanna. So we have to say that because there absolutely is, because you want to be very careful when let's say if someone is on an SSRI, that elevates the level of serotonin in their body. Kanna is also a serotonin elevating, plant. So you don't want to have too much serotonin in your body, which could cause serotonin syndrome, which is, could be dangerous if in an extreme case. And so, we always tell people that on the get-go. Having said that, when we know a lot of people who are on SSRIs, they're like, we want to be on it, and we understand, of course, and I'm going to say this here because I think it's very important to repeat that if anyone is on an SSRI, they really need to work with their doctors to slowly taper off, because this is not something you can just stop cold turkey.
Oh, yeah.
Be very, very dangerous. So, so having said that, I mentioned before that there are absolutely practitioners out there who, want to help their patients slowly wean off and taper off of SSRIs. And that process can also be problematic because there might be certain symptoms that come up, withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah.
And what we've learned, because we've been, again, they've been using CAW to help with this process, is that it really helps the whole process. It really helps support them. So as they come off a little bit, if they come off of SSRIs, they're taking more and more of CAW, as a
balance. So it's like, okay, this is like silly math, but like, let's say they were on, I don't even know the milligrams. So let's just say 10 as like, that's their high. So it would be 0 Kanna. And then if it was like dropped down to 8 milligrams, would it be like 2 milligrams of Kanna? Or is it like they still have to go down to 8 to 6 to 4. And then you start with like 2 to 4 to 6 of Kanna? Or can they actually balance? I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but like, let's say they were on 10 and now they're on 5 milligrams of an SSRI. Again, I know that's not the right math for that, but say they're on 5, can they be now on 5 milligrams of Kanna to balance what would have been their 10 milligrams of the whatever SSRI they were on originally?
I cannot answer that question. That really is a doctor question.
Right.
And just to be clear, I think it also depends on the individual.
Right.
And how long someone has been on an SSRI, like whether it's years, it's only been like a month. So the longer someone has been on SSRI, the longer it's going to take them to titrate down.
Yes.
And that's really all I can say about that. Okay. I think that it's really dependent on the person. And also it's a question for, the functional medicine doctors that do work with plant medicines, which are increasingly more and more, but still not so numerous. And I really wish that could, expand more, because people are looking for options. Yeah. But there are, the fact is that there are,
Right. Yeah. Hello, my friends. It's your host, Kat Walsh. I want to take a few minutes away from the episode and both tell you a story and also talk to you about something that I am so excited and just to share with the world. But before I even get into that, I want to first caveat this with a very short story. I was just telling a friend the other day that if I had 3 months to live, there is nothing that I would change about my life. Nothing. I wanted to make sure that Trip on This season 4 was the best that it could be. I'm finally going to another country. I'm going to Portugal, my first time ever living abroad. But the thing that I want to talk most about right now is I have released my self-guided microdosing program called The Miracle Zone. The Miracle Zone is my prayer for the world. It has been the journey of a lifetime for me. It is an invitation. It is a seed. It is the beginning of awakening to our fullest potential, our power, our courage, and the life that we can look back at the end of our days and say, I went for it. That has been what my whole life has been about since 2020, since I began this journey of Trip on This, since I began becoming an entrepreneur, since I began this path. And the love and the joy and the pride that I feel inside of myself is not just a cat journey. This is the human journey when we discover just how amazing we are. And so this program called the Miracle Zone that I have created is a living embodiment of hopefully inspiration, of guidance back to your highest potential. And so if you hear this and you feel that you're ready to discover all that you are and all that you can do in this life, I invite you to check out my Miracle Zone microdosing program. It is available on both my websites, lifewithkatwalsh.com, as well as the Trip on This website. And again, it's self-guided. No microdoses are not included. Yes, I do have preferred partners and resources. I will say nothing more about it on that front, but yes, everything that you would need to have is included in this program. But again, the microdoses themselves are not actually sold in this self-download. As always, thank you all for listening to Trip on This. Thank you all for being part of my journey. Thank you all for being truly my dream come true. I'm so honored and happy to have you here. I'm so honored to be here. And with that, I pass it back over to whichever guest you're listening to right now, because you know they're probably epic. I mean, it is amazing. Like, and obviously it sounds very similar to microdosing, right? Like where it's, you titrate down, it's working on the same, I don't know if it's working on the same serotonin 2A receptor, but there is still just an influx of serotonin. And, you know, as more studies go in, I know Imperial College was doing studies with like on a psilocybin to see, do people need to fully titrate off in order to microdose? Is there a threshold? So I think they're still trying to figure out, we're still in the very early days of really understanding this stuff, because it could be a long process for people. And obviously some people need help sooner. So I think they are trying to see, do people need to fully get off? Can we actually have people on at once? So TBD, right, as we discover this. But it's good to know that if people are looking for a natural, basically like a natural SSRI, like you're saying, that there is an option, that there could be a couple of options, right? Whether Kanna is more of a fit, whether psilocybin is more of a fit. But I think what you're saying, what's interesting about Kanna in general is that not having the psychoactive component is going to be very attractive to a lot of people. A lot of people, you know, right? I personally like a little trip, but I love the feeling. The Ka that you sent me is gone already. Like I love it. Like it also tastes delicious to me. So I was like, I need to put this over here. But I feel when I could feel the support of it, and I'd love for you to talk a little bit. We've talked about the word empathogenic. But just to kind of define that for people, MDMA is also considered, right, an empathogenic. So I've always understood Kanna to be nature's MDMA. Can you just talk about a little bit about what an empathogen is, and how would you describe that for people that are like, empatho what? What does that do?
Yeah, for sure. So the word empathogenic. So think of empathy. It has the same root, right? So what an empathogen, the definition of an empathogen, is a substance that helps create more emotional openness and feelings of empathy towards others. And that's sort of like the basic level of what it means. It's often called a heart opener because you have this sort of greater feeling of connection, of oneness with everything around you. But I do want to take this opportunity to actually talk about the difference between Kanna and MDMA, both of which share the common aspect of being an empathogen, because both open the heart, that you feel this oneness, but the similarities kind of end there.
Okay.
First of all, MDMA, right? First of all, MDMA is synthetic and Kanna is organic, it's natural, it's plant. And MDMA has amphetamines, which Kanna does not. So the feeling of that euphoric connection, oneness is going to be a lot more intense with MDMA than with Kanna.
Sure.
Right. And of course, also a positive point is that, Kanna does not contain any amphetamines.
Right.
Also, as we know, with longer term use, continuous use of MDMA, it can be very damaging to your neuroreceptors and damaging to your brain. And Kanna, on the other hand, is neuroprotective because of particular alkaloids, especially mesabrenone, which actually has the ability to help restore certain neurotransmitters, especially if they have been damaged by let's say, any excessive CNS stimulants like cocaine or amphetamines or that kind of thing. And so it's really incredible because this is not an aspect that people talk a lot about, but it's a huge difference between
Right.
that Kanna and MDMA.
Hmm.
So Kanna you can take, like I said, it's neuroprotective and it's adaptogenic, which means it's not toxic to the liver. You can take it every day, and it's not habit forming, right? And in fact, there have been some preliminary studies that have been done on Kanna. And I mention this because sometimes MDMA can be like that. People can chase
Oh,
that
right, right,
feeling.
right. Sure.
It can be, addictive in that sense. But what's interesting is that the way Kanna works in the body is it has it has an alkaloid called mesembrinone, and mesembrinone is a PDE4 inhibitor, the enzyme PDE4. And what that means is it has the potential actually of helping um, being helpful as a treatment for things like heroin, morphine dependence, and it's like I said, there's some preliminary studies that have been done about this, but it's been really interesting. So um, yeah, so that's interesting, and also with regard to alcohol abuse or alcohol
Yeah.
addiction, traditionally in South Africa, Kanna has been used to treat alcohol abuse. And it's actually called in Afrikaans,
Hmm.
ons het rooie drank, which means our dry drink.
Oh,
So
interesting.
it's a substitute for alcohol, which is kind of interesting. Or for some people who are trying to get off,
Sure.
alcohol, and this is another way to sort of have that state change or have feel like, okay, this is something that's helping me. I don't. It's also helping me not want and not crave the alcohol. So it's such an interesting plant in that sense. What else? Yeah, and MDMA is still Schedule One
Yeah,
drug.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's also that too. But I love the neuroprotectiveness. I mean, not having it sounds like benefits actually for the body. I don't know that MDMA has any like benefits necessarily for the body in that way, in the way that you're describing with Kanna. I think that the thing that was like blowing my mind as you're like mentioning everything is like, why did I not know about this until a year and a half ago? Like that's when Kanna kind of came on my radar, maybe 2 years ago now. But I think I think a lot of people are going to be listening to this and be like, why have I never heard of Kanna before? Like it's been around for
No,
thousands of years. Like what?
yeah, that's such a good question because I get asked this all the time, which makes me think, I have my answer, but I'm going to give you sort of the
Hmm.
what is the full picture. I think I think that what first had to happen was, I think humanity coming to a point where it's like, okay, we can't rely on pharmaceuticals. There's something, it's just like not helping me, even though it's been drilled into me that this is what I need to take.
Yeah.
So then people started to look at alternative health. Then they started getting to organic foods. Herbal medicine was a big thing, and this was
Mm.
like, oh my God, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Like,
Yeah.
oh, suddenly more and more people were into that. And then from that point on, it's like, oh, herbs, plants. Oh, plants. I guess they're good for us. And then what else is out there? And I think that, again, because people are looking for solutions, and we are also, I think, as a society, really getting to the point where we're just so imbalanced. There's so much dysregulation, emotional dysregulation. There's so much stress. Everybody's filled with anxiety. And then suddenly, what happened in the 60s had a resurgence with psychedelics, right? So the psychedelics renaissance is now in full swing, and that's awesome. And people are, rediscovering things like ayahuasca, psilocybin. I'm going to speak more to the organic plant-based psychedelics because
Yep.
really that's not really my wheelhouse on
Yep.
the aesthetic side. But suddenly it was like, oh, all these amazing things. And I think initially why this happened with psychedelics first and not so many of the psychoactives that were not psychedelics is because we got to a point that we needed to have like a real kind of hit on the head
Yeah. Yeah.
almost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Egos get blasted
Sure.
open.
It's a shake. It's a hard shake.
Shake, right? And we needed that because we needed to get out of like whatever our cage was, with what our ego was perceiving. So those plants are amazing. Like ayahuasca is amazing. It's also amazing. It just like blasts you out, right? But then after that, what's the next point? What's the next step? It's integration. It's like, okay, now I've had this realization. Oh my God, I know what's been plaguing me. The root of my emotional suffering comes from X, Y, and Z. Now, how do I then work through that? Now that I have this knowledge, right? How am I going to integrate it into life? What changes am I going to make? Now that's a different process.
Right.
That's an entirely different process. And that requires slowing down. It requires not escaping to kind of chase another cosmic entertainment, or else. And Kanna is beautiful, right? Because and not just Kanna, there are other active plants, of course, as well. But what's beautiful about Kanna in this regard is it's super helpful for integration post ceremony, right?
Just about to ask you that. Yep.
Yes. And why? Because again, it's like it holds the space for you to process emotions. I mentioned before that Kanna is this beautiful medicine that's coming to more and more people nowadays because of its ability to address this core wound of separation. Right. Kanna, by definition, because it's an empathogen, because of all the other sort of anxiolytic effects, the mood elevating effects, the energizing effects, all of it really addresses, but especially the empathogenic effect of what because Kanna teaches connection and it really helps us feel that connection again, it addresses that core wound, which I mentioned, out of separation. And what's beautiful is that it kind of post-ceremony, it holds the space for you to allow for all your emotions to come up. It increases the emotional range, especially if you could take it consistently. But as an integration tool, it's beautiful because it still kind of connects you to that oneness field, if you can call it that, right? So you get to still have a little bit of shift from your regular day-to-day. But because it connects you to your emotions and your feelings, everything that needs to come up will come up.
Right.
And it's coming up for you to integrate, right? So you can no longer isolate it, suppress it. No, it's your friend. Kanna is actually bringing all these emotions for you to process. Yeah. So that's beautiful. And it also then helps you kind of make sense. And you don't have to make sense cognitively, by the way. It could be making sense you just are embodying whatever that situation. And so that's beautiful that way. Also, post certain types of ceremonies or certain types of journeys or trips, it's great for replenishing serotonin because I mentioned it's a serotonin reuptake inhibitor and a serotonin releasing agent. So there's that when, particularly after MDMA, for example, not at the same time, but afterwards, it's great for replenishing. And, it's also, Kanna is also beautiful for people who maybe are like, I see everybody doing these psychedelics. And so they always come back, tell me like they have such great experiences, but I have some trepidation, with really kind of going that deep into mind altering substances. There's something in between. And this is a great gateway plant.
Yes.
To help, people kind of feel into what it feels like, but not have, all the hallucinations and all the. And so it's beautiful that way as well. Okay. And, why now? This is a long-winded way of saying why now, because I think we needed to have that blast open. Yeah. And, and now it's like, okay, here's a subtler medicine that can help you not just integrate, but it's a subtler medicine to help you understand that, it's helping you incorporate itself into your daily routine. Yeah. So similar to microdosing, let's say psilocybin, for example, why suddenly the microdosing sort of trend is happening? Because it's like, okay, that's wonderful. I can have this massive experience and that's wonderful. But really what might be more helpful is having something that consistently I can take that is, I don't even have to know that it's working. It's working. And that actually goes under the radar of our egos. So we don't have that much resistance. Right. And yet helping support us. So in the same vein of the popularity of microdosing, I think that's also why Kanna has come in. Yes. You don't, people say, microdosing Kanna, which you absolutely can, but Kanna itself, full dose is fine. And it's not going to blow you out of whatever you're doing. Right. you can take it before work. It helps you focus. You can take it during the day for more energy. You can take it in the evening. You can take it with a partner for more intimacy. You can take it for doing meditation or body work because it calms the monkey mind and it just grounds and centers you enormously. So it's a very adaptable, and it's an adaptogen.
Right.
So it's a very adaptable plant to your daily life, however you want to work with it.
Right.
And that's the beauty of this amazing plant.
Yeah. When you were talking about, I'm curious about dosages, and I'm sure people listening, when you were talking, like, I took a ceremonial dose, and then there's a full dose, as you called it, and then a microdose. I personally don't know what a ceremonial dose actually would be. So I'd love you to start there. How long does that feeling last, roughly? How quickly does it come on? Some of the practicals, if people are listening, being like, what can I literally expect if I was going to go in ceremonially? Full dose range, right? So in the middle, and then as a micro.
Sure. So ceremonial dose, it's interesting because before I even get into how much to take for a ceremonial dose, I just want to clarify for people, you have to be very careful when you look online and when you see, Kanna, how many milligrams of this? We're here talking about Kanna extract, first of all. I'm not talking about Kanna herb, which you can also buy easily in tea, and that's lovely. But just so everybody knows, I'm talking about Kanna extracts, which are much more concentrated because sometimes people think, you're going to see these huge numbers. And it's like, no, they're talking about herb or they're talking about something else.
Yeah.
So, and also, here's the thing with Kanna, really know your source, because you will find a lot of people selling Kanna online. A lot of it may not even be Kanna. Some of it could be an ice plant. It could be a species of ice plant that they're thinking or calling as Kanna, which it's not. And so that's really important. First of all, know your source, know where it's coming from. If you can understand, for example, and know what the alkaloid content is, that's also important. So you could have Kanna, perfectly fine, true Kanna plant, and you could have next to no alkaloids.
Okay.
And you could have Kanna, which has a very high level of alkaloids. So not every plant has the same amount. It has a lot to do with the kind of species it is, where it grows, how it's grown, and how it's cultivated.
Sure.
And so that's something to know.
Okay.
Let's say you know that now, and you're like, okay, no, I know that, whatever I'm getting is legit and has, solid alkaloid content levels. So then, like I said, online, you'll see, ceremonial doses is 500 milligrams, and the way, like our Kanna, the way that I would say is anything between 90 and 300 is already ceremonial dose.
Okay.
But that's because our Kanna is like super, super high potency, and, it's really high quality, and it's very, very concentrated. So, so I would say, like, for us, it would be like that.
It would be 90 milligrams to 300.
That's 90 to 300 is already really intense.
Okay.
Again, everybody's body is different.
Sure. Yeah.
So it depends on the person. So let's say you go to Kanna ceremony and you take that dose, and usually when it starts to kind of come on is anywhere between 30 to 45 minutes, but maybe 45 minutes is 45 minutes to an hour is when you really start to feel it. And it will last like 4 or 5 hours.
Okay. 4 or 5 hours.
If you have that, similar to, a lot of the other kinds of journeys, I'm giving a very generalized average.
Yes.
So that's how it is. But the beautiful thing about Kanna, again, is that there's no crash coming down. There's not like suddenly, oh my God, I feel, like horrible, like after that. So, and that is also helpful to know.
Right.
In terms of a regular dose, like the way, for example, the way we have our chews and our tincture, we say one dose is 30 milligrams, and that's regular dose. Again, everybody's different. Some people need more, people need less. A lot depends on also medical history. So what we know is that anybody who's taken amphetamine salts, like Adderall, for example, in the past, they're going to need a higher dose.
Okay.
To
ever?
set their
is there a certain amount?
Ever.
Really? Oh, no way. Okay. All right.
Recently, more so, but it could have been 10 years ago, and you don't take it anymore, but you're going to still need a higher dose. That higher dose, it's not like forever higher dose. You can actually start to lower that dose and kind of come back to regular dose, after a week or two. Again, I'm generalizing, everybody's different. Yes. And so there's that. And also another thing that most people don't realize is that serotonin first addresses inflammation in the body. If you have a lot of inflammation, serotonin is always doing something good. It's helping you lower the inflammation first before you start to feel the lift. And Kanna is also a plant that if you're taking it now, I'm going to shift to like regular dose, 30 milligrams or less, right? There's always a number of people, they're like, well, I don't really feel it, right? There's some people immediately feel it, and they're like, I don't really feel it. Given what I've explained just now, inflammation is one thing, medical history is another. The way Kanna works with the body is it also needs to be primed. Your body needs to be primed to really work with it. Your body needs to kind of, if you're introducing this substance, for some people, they just need time for it to start working with them in the way where they can really feel. So that is why we always, our supplements, our Kanna supplements, our Choose and Tincture are formulated to be a daily supplement.
Right.
And there's a reason for that because there is a cumulative effect of Kanna that often, even if you feel like, whoa, I feel it immediately, even I didn't realize the full effect of Kanna, of 30 days, daily Kanna, not 30 days, but daily Kanna until I actually started doing for 30 days straight. And then I had much deeper experience from when, let's say, I used to just do it maybe every time I felt stressed, right? This is like, and it was an incredible discovery, personally, because it really speaks to the depth of what this medicine does. So I'll give you an example. So the first time after I started taking for 30 days straight, I noticed a huge change in my behavior in terms of patience. I am a very impatient person by nature. And suddenly I was like, wow, I'm not getting frustrated at all. Like things could take a long time. It's just driving me crazy. And it just was just not triggering anymore. People were not triggering for me anymore. I felt much more sort of empathy, right? But not just in that instant, but just generally very much more understanding. I could put myself in their shoes a lot easier. And also my clarity and focus, mental clarity also improved for me a lot, which also, every time at around 3 or 4 o'clock, I would start to get really foggy. Yeah. And that really supported for me. So I didn't have that anymore, which is incredible. Yeah. So again, every person's going to have a different experience, but this is what, we often hear this, what I just shared is actually not uncommon for people who are taking it regularly.
Well, I find that really interesting. And as somebody who has a lot of inflammation, so I want to say back just to make sure I understand what you said. So if someone has a lot of inflammation in their body and they're taking Kanna, that Kanna is going to likely, obviously we know bodies are different, but likely work on lowering the inflammation as its starting point before it starts getting into potentially more mood regulation, or you need more Kanna so that as it's working on the inflammation, lowering it can finally get into some of the emotional body. Because I have a ton of inflammation in my most Americans do, right? So we have a problem with inflammation in the country anyway. Almost all of the autoimmunes are inflammation diseases, and that's now I think it's like the highest. It's beyond what like heart disease and things like that. And so this is such good information because I didn't know that actually. And it's interesting because I have been taking the Kanna pretty much every day. And I find myself just like, when I see, I set my little intention and it's usually just something about being in my heart, right? Like, I think that's the place, I think that we all kind of like yearn to be because we are the best possible versions of ourselves when we're there. But I can feel like certain days where I'm like, do I feel it? Am I good? And then other days, the first time I really felt it and I was surprised actually. So I was like, maybe it bypassed. So it's interesting how the body just like what it needs in the moment, I feel like, because I definitely still had inflammation on my knees and yet it went straight to helping me calm down in that moment. And then other days, maybe now I'm going to pay attention to my body when I take it and see, is my inflammation actually improved to my senses? Because I didn't even know to look, to be honest.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. So Kanna is very anti-inflammatory. There's tons of studies on this. You can go online, you can find this. So it has anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, immunomodulatory, and yeah, and all those aspects as well. That's part of sort of what Kanna does, and its alkaloids to help to do. So it addresses, all those areas, which is really, really fascinating.
And it
So
has been
again,
studied. Oh, I'm sorry to cut you off.
what I just mentioned, like its anti-inflammatory properties, have definitely been studied.
Uh-huh.
That aspect has been studied. And inflammation, of course, is the root of so many chronic diseases.
Hmm.
So there also have been some papers written and just preliminary studies on the potential, for example, of Kanna to help with chronic diseases, or degenerative diseases like Parkinson's,
Yeah.
Alzheimer's, and also ADHD.
Hmm.
So it's a very, it's not, this is what I'm saying is not like, oh, I'm the only one saying this. No, this is from
Yes.
studies that have been done and
Yeah.
have been very fascinating. So this is a medicine that I think we're really only just now beginning to understand.
Yeah.
And I was actually in South Africa and Namibia earlier this year because I really wanted to talk to the indigenous stewards of this plant, who are the Bushmen and the Khoi. Sadly, of course, their numbers have been decimated through genocide, war,
Mm.
you know, on colonialism, apartheid. So their cultures have been very much reduced and into sort of marginalized, um, and they're not living in great conditions. So it was really interesting speaking with them and the medicine people there, those of whom still know Kanna, because also a lot of the wisdom is not, it's been lost almost. You just have to find like the elders
Yeah.
here and there, people who still carry this knowledge. And what they were saying is that, Kanna is a plant that is, how do I say this? It wants to collaborate with people.
Mm.
It does not want to take over. So ayahuasca takes over. So it definitely takes over.
Yeah.
Cannabis takes over.
Yeah.
When I say take over, I mean when you're ingesting it, you will.
Oh, it
you
takes
will
over. Yeah. Yeah.
because it actually wants to come into relationship with humans. That's what the indigenous people have said to me, which actually makes total sense because that's my own experience with Kanna and working with it for over 10, 11 years now. It is there for us to understand, for us to slow down and come into a relationship with it in order to empower our own healing and thriving.
Yeah.
So it is a subtle and very powerful medicine. In some ways, I think it's even more powerful because it is subtle.
Yeah, sure.
Right. And so, yeah, it's just really fascinating.
I see why you see the complementary aspects of it, though, because the subtle realms are subtle for a reason. And if you are pretty disconnected, right, it's hard to feel subtlety because we're a little numb. I mean, a lot of our society is numbing out in a variety of different ways, whether it's through alcohol, through other drugs, through media, just ways of just like, how do I not feel what's going on? Because there is a lot going on, and the idea of like feeling what's actually happening can probably sound like a very scary thing. And so the feeling of those subtle energies, get a little lost at times. And I think why, like you're saying, the blast off, the blast open, you can't deny, it doesn't matter how numb you're feeling and what any moment, for any reason, psilocybin, ayahuasca, DMT, these things just shake us into levels of awareness that we hadn't been privy to. And once that inquiry begins, and the art of contemplation begins, right? And really sitting with ourselves and getting quiet with ourselves. I think it requires a sense of quietude. I don't know if that's a word, but to understand what we need, we can't just keep consuming
Absolutely.
stuff, right? Or we can't hear what we actually need. And so I can see the thread of when you're on the path of discovery, and it doesn't mean that you need a psychedelic to kind of really, put you on a super highway. Because if you're already coming to this space with level of discovery and a question mark and are wanting to grow and are wanting, that you want to shift in your life, that there's more potential, there is more love inside you, there's more everything, but you don't know where to begin. The subtle can work with us more in general, whether a plant medicine or not. So intuition, our heart gets to speak more when the mind isn't just yelling constantly in fear. And so I love that. And I think coming back to that original question of just where we're at in our consciousness of humanity is more ready to engage with that subtleness and the power of that subtleness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So this is a sort of a coming full circle moment when, you're asking about why now, right? Why now suddenly in the zeitgeist is Kanna so present I think is exactly because of that. I think we are at the point, I think humanity collectively is at a point where we need that. And it is exploring those realms. It's no longer, okay, yes, my mind has been blown. Great. There's more to this 3D world than what we see. Fantastic. Mm-hmm. Now, how do I work with what I now know? And you said so beautifully just now, Kat, subtle realms is where it's happening. Mm-hmm. It's where it's all at. Yeah. And it's something that, again, it's the antithesis of kind of Western sort of yang culture, right? It's actually much more Eastern. But that's the balance, right? It's like, how do we incorporate that and and embody that, awareness, that heart intelligence into our lives?
Yeah. I think this is going to be a great opportunity we've been kind of dancing through talking about Ka, but I'd love to give this last little bit of time to talk about Ka, the mission behind it. What is it? Where can people find it? Take it away.
Absolutely. Thank you. So Empathogenics, our mission is to restore full spectrum aliveness for all beings. So full spectrum aliveness is exactly what I explained, during this whole podcast, is about kind of reconnecting us to our heart intelligence, to that feeling of being alive, that, our full range of emotions, what we can access when we're not in stress or fight or flight. So Ka is all about that. It's about helping people, relieve their stress. It's about helping people lift their mood and really come into their hearts and be more centered there rather than in the fear that's in their minds. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. Yes, and we believe that this is really, this is the key to a lot of planetary healing.
Before I'm going to stop you right there, and then I'm going to have you go on. I can't wait because we're filming this before the season 4 is releasing. Like I mentioned, in a couple of weeks. I always tell my audience this. They know all the little backstories. I'm going to send you the opener for this because it is literally everything about what you're describing about the fullness of the human experience. That's so much what I want for the world to just tap into. So you're going to trip out when I send this to you because you're going to be like, this is such alignment right now, because when you're talking about the aliveness, I'm going to send to you, and then everybody watching this is already going to be like, yeah, we just listened to the opener. So anyway, I wanted to stop you there and say we were so on the same page because yes.
Beautiful. I feel, that's synchronicity. That's alignment. It's beautiful.
Totally.
No coincidence at all. I started working with Kanna more, 11 years ago, more than that. And about 5 years ago is when we launched 5 years ago is when we started doing research for Ka. And we wanted to come up with a supplement that was not just efficacious, but was also super clean. That wouldn't have any sort of anything that was bad. And so it took us some time to create something that was chewable, because our chews were our first product, that was not a gummy, And here's the difference. Gummies usually have sugar. They get boiled. Everything gets boiled up to, 200 degrees plus, and so it loses a lot of bioactivity. We essentially invented a new way of making a little chewable that does not use any heat at all. So everything is made at room temperature. That and therefore there's no degradation of the plant ingredients and no degradation of bioactivity. And it also does not have any, certainly no GMOs and no sugar, not even no artificial sweeteners, even, and no natural quote unquote flavors. And it also does not have any preservatives, not even citric acid. So if you look at the back panel of our labels of all the products, you won't even find, you're like, well, something must be missing. So no, we don't have any chemicals in there. And we were able to do this because of the way that we formulated it with 100% plants. So, and that's why our chews are actually patent pending.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations. That's a big deal. Wow.
It was, yeah, it was a lot of effort.
I'm sure, but I mean, if you've discovered a way to not degrade the plant, I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? Like with anything, with cooking, right? With cooking vegetables or anything that we can think of, like that cooks out the nutrients.
For sure, absolutely. And yeah, so even our, everything, speaking of aliveness, our chews are super alive, our tincture is super alive because of the way. And, then we launched the tincture, and they're different in the sense that the chews are great. Like they are more of a time release. So like I love taking them in the morning because then, I'll still feel the effects, like either like probably all the way. For me, it's all day. For some people, maybe by about 5 o'clock, they don't feel it as much. And then we say, hey, you can use the tincture. It's a more immediate peak effect. So you can use it to kind of re-energize you at the, in the afternoon when you're not feeling the chew as much, and they each kind of activate each other again. Or, the tincture is great for going out with friends and you don't want to drink alcohol, especially, and you still want a change of state, or you still want to feel that sort of, lift, that openness, that energy. It's beautiful because number one, you don't get a hangover. And number two, you get to connect. You get to connect with people. It really helps with social anxiety. That as well. And so, yeah, we're very much about making clean products, innovative and clean products. And we make everything in-house, by the way. We don't use any co-packers. So that's another difference in the way that we do things. And we definitely only use like the highest quality ingredients. And the Kanna we use, I've already mentioned, is actually from a very particular species of Kanna. And it's the process of extraction is also is a patented process. So we created these products that we're offering to people to really help them. And they're all meant to be integrated into your daily life easily. And we're excited and we're all about educating people also more about this beautiful plant.
Yeah.
And
I so appreciate it. I can hear your passion with it. And I think that's such alignment, right? When like, that's alignment, that's abundance, that's everything when it's, you're a steward of the plant, helping to bring this now to the Western world. Obviously it's been in other indigenous cultures and now helping to bring it over here and, in a way that feels like it's the highest integrity for you. And I get that that's a very important aspect, that for the plant itself and for the experience and for the greater mission for what you're wanting to do for others. I can feel it and see it. And I know everybody else will too, because that authenticity rings true. And so I'm just very, very grateful for this conversation. I personally learned a lot, and I'm definitely going to be, I think, playing with higher doses just to see, for inflammation actually for myself, to see if that can actually be a tool for me also in the inflammatory aspect. So I'm curious now to really go deeper with it. So thank you.
And if I may, Kat,
please.
You were talking about, full spectrum aliveness, which is what we were talking about earlier. One thing that has to happen, which, I want to mention, because I talked a little bit about the indigenous, is that, a big part of our brand values is reciprocity. So we only source our Kanna from suppliers that do direct profit sharing with the indigenous. That's one thing I want to mention. And also, we are also in the process of, and that was one of the reasons I was in South Africa and Namibia, is to really understand it's taken us a while to find an appropriate partner to do a give back and to create a program that makes sense for that particular region for those particular peoples. So it's just taken time, but that's something that we feel very, very strongly about, and we're in the process of doing as well. Oh, before I forget, I wanted to mention also that we created a special code for your audience.
Oh, yes. Okay, perfect. What is it?
It's Trip on This.
Trip on this, you guys. If anybody can forget that, Trip on This. And what is the code for? What is the amount?
So the code, so that people can get 10% off if they come to site. ohmyka.com, ohmyka.com, to come and try the Choose of the Tincture. And they can also, would love for everyone to follow us on Instagram or Facebook at ka.empathogenics, and TikTok as well.
Perfect. I will make sure I put the code. Everything will be in the caption, you guys. So definitely check that out. And Stephanie, I'm inspired and literally can't wait. I think I'm like literally almost done with the bottle that I have, but I'm going to go and have some now. And actually, I think I'm bringing, what I love about this is bringing a new level of awareness to my body now when I take it. I've been, I think, so focused on the mind aspect of it that I'm so excited to actually integrate it into all the parts of myself. So thank you so much again for coming on.
Absolutely. And I love how you're so intentional. Intention is such a big part of whenever you work with. And I think everyone should do that. We always encourage people to do that. And you're already doing that. So that's beautiful. And thank you so much, Kat, for having me on Trip on This.
Of course. And for everyone, as always, trip on this.